All right, YouTube, it's me, David Harry, your favorite YouTuber and vlogger. Right, so in this video, what I'm going to be doing is testing the difference between the 32-bit floating point recording of a DJI Mic Mini 2S compared to its transmitted audio or its wireless audio. And to do this, I have basically switched everything off on the microphone, so no tone controls or no dynamics control, nothing like that, because the internal recording, no matter how you've got the microphone set, the internal recording is going to be doing absolutely nothing other than recording the capsule. So what I've done is to make sure that the transmitted audio is basically following the same thing, as in switch everything off. And then all I will have done in post is to have leveled them by ways of a limiter, and also just gotten the overall like output level up to the -14 lufs, so that it is like, you know, of a decent volume coming out on YouTube. Now just quickly, let me just see. Oh no, it switched off. Didn't crash though, it just switched off, which I suppose is a good thing for this. It's a GoPro, by the way, as if you can't tell. Now let me just try and show you something quickly here. Okay, and I can't get too close because, yeah, you know, minimum focus distance and all that palaver with the GoPros. Anyway, so as you can see here, I'm using the DJI USB-C receiver. I'm also actually using a 2-pan T032 terabyte external SSD on the iPhone and stuff, my newer rig, all that stuff. In fact, I'll have the details for all that crap in the video description. And also there's a pair of ears on top of my iPhone, because what I'm going to be doing after this test is to see if I can do some kind of a binaural setup with 2 of the DJI mics. And, you know, if that actually comes out and sounds decent, I mean, it's not going to be like, you know, completely binaural. However, it'll definitely give some kind of a very wide, spacious stereo recording, which might be binaural like. Now, if that is the case after I've done my testing, I'm definitely going to have a video about that as well, with the examples that I'll do and stuff. Anywho, so to the reveal then. So actually I would have it's not mic 1 and mic 2, is it? Okay, so recording 1 has been the 32-bit floating point from within the actual mic, and recording 2 has been the transmitted audio. So could you hear much difference between these things? Now, of course, there are technically huge differences, but for the sake of what I've been doing here, where the dynamics of the recordings are like being like, you know, okay and stuff, or at least they haven't gone out of bounds, then, you know, yeah, have you heard much difference? Actually, in fact, let me do something where the internal recording would definitely screw up, and let's see if the 32-bit recording is actually like doing its job. Now I'll get the mic a bit closer to me. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just to talk a lot louder. I'm going to flip between the 2 recordings, and then we can see if one of them actually massively distorts, which I'm going to imagine the internal recording will. And will the, well, not the internal recording, the wireless recording, that should be massively distorting or clipping right now. And the internal recording on the microphone, that should be intact. Okay, let's just see if that worked. Okay, so I was very loud going into the mic there, as you could hear. Now, other than the likes of maybe popping and stuff, which hopefully didn't happen because I've got the dead cat on, and I wasn't particularly going straight into the mic with me wind out my mouth and stuff, the microphone itself should not have been distorting, because of course, oh, you know, I'll do this bit. Right, the problem with 32-bit floating point recordings is people think that the magic and stuff. Well, it's not. Right, I just went off on a big mad one there, so I've just reeled myself back in. So basically, a 32-bit floating point recording has got a huge dynamic range. However, what comes before that in the signal chain, such as your capsule, like any of the electronics in the microphone, preamplification, and even analog to digital conversion, although we could argue and say that the A to D process is actually part of, like, you know, the encoding and recording process. However, they really are 2 discrete components to the chain. But between your capsule, the mic, the preamp, the electronics, you know, and like, you know, the very last thing before the actual encoding to the 32-bit floating point happens, what it is, there could easily be clipping or distortion or anything like that ahead of the recording itself. So whilst the recording itself technically is like, you know, indestructible, as it were, as in you'll never hit that dynamic range, the problem is there are things in the chain before the actual recording which definitely can clip or distort. So this whole thing about 32-bit floating point recording being like as if it's magic or something, yeah, it's not okay. You know, it's just that most YouTubers, you know, say that they're audio people, quite clearly don't know what they're doing. And that whole thing about like you can retrieve distorted recordings, you don't and you can't, right? The simple fact is the recording in the first place isn't distorted, okay, unless the mic was clipped. People use the analogies of like 16-bit recording when they're talking about 32-bit recording, and it's two completely different things, like, you know. But anyway, who am I to question all those dead brainy audio people on YouTube who've got like loads of views, and because they've got loads of views, everyone out there thinks that these people know what they're talking about. Anywho, I'm diving off. I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye, because I'm really going to start pissing people off in a minute.